Yes, I have met Mother. I have been with her many times. I've had her darshan on many, many occasions. But before I tell you some of my meetings with Mother, I want to be very clear that all of you, if you ask her, will also be with her. All you have to do is call her, and she will come. So I'm only able to share the most infinitesimal experiences, because what can I really say about the Divine Mother? This year marks 50 years since I first met her. I was a callow youth, rather arrogant and full of myself. I had just turned 23, and I had been promised a scholarship to Shantiniketan by a Pandit with whom I was studying. And it all fell through. And he said, if you really want to do yoga, practice samatha and go back home to your family. Something rose up in me and said, no, I am going to India. I was 22. Within a very short time, a few days in fact, I met a woman, Jyoti Priya, Dr. Judith Tyberg, whose name had been given to her by Sri Aurobindo. And she founded the East-West Cultural Center in Los Angeles. She was a great Sanskrit scholar. She had gone at the age of 19 to Benares to find the secret of the Vedas. And all of these Pandits that she met told her there was really no secret. These were just kind of ramblings. And on the last day there, a man came up to her and said, I hear you've been seeking the secret of the Vedas. And he gives her a typewritten copy of Sri Aurobindo's Secret of the Vedas. She read it, she went to Pondicherry, and she said, I have no further to look. And Sri Aurobindo gave her the name Jyoti Priya. When I met her, first thing she said to me, but you are destined to go to see the Mother. She said, I'll need a sample of your handwriting and your photograph. And she took both, immediately sent them to Mother. And you know, those days it took weeks for a letter to get there, but somehow the letter got there much faster. And a telegram came back from Mother. Tell him he may come and stay as long as he likes. Wow. That was incredible. So I went. And I arrived on November 23rd, the evening before darshan. And the next morning, when Mother gave the early morning darshan, was my first vision of her. And whether we were 500 or 5,000 on that street, we knew exactly the moment when Mother looked at us and poured her love and force into us. It's beyond words. And every day she came out in those days. I had the opportunity to see her in the playground, one of the last times she was in the playground. And as she left, she fixed her eyes on me and walked all the way out of the playground. And what she did, I don't know. But then very soon I was called. And those of you who have gone to the ashram and have been to Sri Aurobindo's room, when you walk out of his room and you pass the little alcove where Mother and Sri Aurobindo would sit to give darshan, and you're just ready to go out the door and down the stairs, Mother's chair is there. And that's where she sat. And in those days, you were alone with Mother. Afterwards, Champaklala was always there. Pranab was there. But I was alone with Mother for 1 hour. And the first thing she said to me, after she said, "Bonjour," in that wonderful, wonderful, powerful voice so filled with love and divine delight, she said, "Would you like to talk or would you like to meditate?" Now, I didn't know anything about meditation, but I said, "Mother, I'd like to meditate." And suddenly, I was given the initiation. I can't speak about that. All I can tell you is I don't know how long I cried. I wept and I wept on her feet. And when it was over, she began to speak to me about music. She talked about the great composers. She said to me, "The music most often heard on the inner planes is that of Chopin, but I don't know why." And she became very quiet and she said, "Is the music with you now?" I said, "Yes, Mother, it's always with me." And she smiled and she said, "Not always." And she took it away for some time to work on other things, to prepare me for other things. And she talked to me and talked to me. And then there was silence. And suddenly she says, "You must bring down a new music." Well, I was studying for the Metropolitan Opera and studying voice at Hunter College in New York City on a scholarship from somebody at the Met. And I was learning different languages to sing in Russian, Italian, French, German especially. And I said, "But Mother," I said, "I don't know how to combine words and music." Mother said, No, you must go far above words and bring down the pure music." And many of us have had the same experience when we met Mother, is that everything blanks out, and it all blanked out after that. I don't know how. I know I was there about 1 hour, but I don't recall anything else. So I went back to my room and I wrote to Mother. And the first thing I wrote to her, I said that she had turned my life upside down by meeting her. And I said, "Mother, what should I do? Should I continue my studies of vocal music, preparing for the Metropolitan Opera, or should I study choral conducting, which I was very interested in, choirs? Mother writes, and these are all quotes, one or the other, because the important thing is not so much what you choose, but the spirit in which you will do it. Keep living in you the spirit of consecration, and all will be all right. I didn't know I had the spirit of consecration. My second question was about someone I was in love with. And what do we know about love at 23? And I said, but I love this person, Mother, what should I do? Mother writes, you must marry, no doubt and no hesitation. Wow. So I went back and I said to her, Mother said we have to get married. She said, well, Mother said, okay. The third question. There was a young man, absolutely most handsome man, and he wanted me to go through Europe with him. Said, we'll have great times, we'll find many girlfriends, blah, blah, blah. So I wrote to Mother, should I go with this man? Mother writes, better not. Now, when I had my next meeting with Mother in that room, it was probably some weeks later. And do you know that Mother answered again in greater depth each question in the order I had put it. And she had probably seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in that time, secretaries all over the place troubling her with this question and that question, and she answers exactly as I had written, in depth. And what I remember was the last one, about this man. And she said something that has lived with me for 50 years and has been a guidepost in my life. She said, it is better not to associate with those who live outside of themselves, as it were. Well, I was much too restless a fellow to remain much longer in the ashram. And in 1962, I went back to America. And I said, I'm going to work for Mother. And so I did everything I could to help the ashram. I started a watercolor paper division. And at that time, handmade watercolor paper was available from two companies, an Italian firm and Whatman in England. And the Whatman papers were about to go out because the labor costs became too high. And I had this opportunity for all the watercolor artists in America to step in Whatman papers. And they sent me some samples from the ashram, and I gave it to this Mr. Dyson. His name was Mr. Dyson. And he said, these are beautiful. And he ordered a ream. So I wrote Mother, and I said, Mother, we need a name for the paper. And she named it Arvind. Arvind Papers. Well, the story's sad, because the first shipment of 500 sheets, that big, was not wrapped properly, and seawater spoiled the entire shipment. So I went almost on bended knee to Mr. Dyson and apologized, and I said, we'll send you another ream immediately. And they sent another ream, and this is white paper, white watercolor paper, full of black spots. And he said, how can I accept this? So then there was this whole thing in the ashram. No, they would not change, and I lost all the business. And I had sent samples to all these watercolor artists, and I got glowing reviews. It would have meant millions of dollars for the ashram. Such is human nature. Then, after that fiasco, I was in and out of work, and I got work in a music store. And the fellow in the music store was a musicologist. And I said, well, I started learning a lot more about music. And I wrote to Mother a long letter asking her, or saying that I would like to send her all the music after the 1920s, because she had been in the ashram after that. And I made a list of various composers, and Mother underlined Debussy and Ravel, and writes on the letter, I believe I have heard almost everything they have written, and from here down, I have not heard any of these. And I would be very happy to hear them. So I put 50 recordings together, with long playing records at that time, and sent them to Mother. And she listened to one record every day until she heard all of them. Oh, my heart was so full. Because Mother spoke so much about music. And then she had given me this adesh to bring down the new music. Well, then a few more years went by, a couple of years, and my wife and I were driving on Taconic State Parkway in a blizzard, and some ladies had a big car stalled perpendicular to traffic down this huge mountain, and there was no way to avoid them. And I went into their car, and my wife went through the windshield. Her face just totally covered. Glass had to be picked out. So we wrote to Mother, and Mother said, there will be no scars. My gosh. And just within a day, I had something came to me. It said, buy vitamin E capsules. And I would break them open and put them on all the scars. No scars at the end. So, you know, if a man could get $5 million or so for burning himself without coffee at McDonald's, I could have been very wealthy had it been happening 20 years later. But we got $3,000 for the medical expenses. I wrote to Mother, Mother, I want to send you this money because you have saved my wife's life. You have protected us. Mother writes back, why don't you use the money to come to the inauguration of Oroville? February 1968. The plane tickets were $1,500 each. So we went to Mother. We went to the ashram. And on December 18th, which was my wife's birthday, Mother called us. It's interesting because we had a man who was very, very devoted to the inner life. His name was Isidore. He was in California with Jyoti Priya's group. So he, my wife, and myself went before Mother. Again, alone. That was most interesting. Mother looks at him for a few seconds only, maybe 2 seconds. Smiles at him. He was gone in 2 weeks. This was not for him. And then she looks at my wife and she says, "This is not the first time we have met. You have been with me many times before. Many, many times." Wow. And then she turns to me and she says, "You don't want to come to Oroville in a few years? I feel you can do something there." I said, "Mother, whatever is your will." So we go back to the States. And at this time, through a contact, I got a very fine job in a restaurant. And then someone else offered me a half interest in a restaurant, in Greenwich Village. And for the first time in my life, I was making all kinds of money. I mean, money I had never made ever before. And so the restaurant was failing, and I brought in a French-trained chef, and it was packed every night with all the singers and rock stars and everybody else. Andy Warhol, Neil Diamond, Woody Allen, they were all there. And Otto Preminger would come. So many famous people would come. But even the waitresses, nobody ever singled them out. They had their meals quietly. No one troubled them for autographs and things like that. So I was becoming a very successful restaurateur. When this voice says to me, "Go to California and help Jyoti Priya." Wow. And it doesn't stop. Again and again it says this. So I write to Mother. 1 month goes by, no answer. But the voice doesn't stop. I write to Mother again. And she sends me a telegram. She says, "My answer to you was so positive I thought I had written it." So I dropped everything and we went to help Jyoti Priya. Then I had to find some work. So I got work here and there with a landscape company. Well, suddenly I get a letter from Udar. And he says, "Mother has asked me to write you and tell you that she wants you to prepare to come and build the gardens of the Matrimandir." Now, Mother had said to me, "A few years? You don't want to come to Oroville in a few years?" Wow, this was something. Well, all my life I had been in landscaping with my father. And the plants, can't say, we use the term spoke to me. But there was some connection with plants since my earliest youth. I can remember even at the age of 5 or 6 how one flower was calling to me. It happened to be a hyacinth, which is pride of beauty. And my mother had planted a whole beautiful little planting of it. And I went and I ripped up every flower and brought this huge bouquet into my mother, who with tears of joy and sadness accepted them. So I had a lot of grounding with the plants and the flowers. So I wrote back and I said, Mother, do you want me to study, to go to college and prepare, or to do physical work with landscape fern? Again, Mother writes, both. So I had to work during the day and go to college at night. But it was not to be 3 years. It was only 9 months since we had seen her when I get a telegram. A biento. See you soon. And by that time, I had gotten a job in Beverly Hills, California, on Rodeo Drive. All the famous actors and actresses came to that nursery. And the gentleman was very kind, but he was elderly. Called me into his office one day. I didn't know why. Now you have to remember that this place at that time was probably worth only 50 million or so. Now it'd be worth hundreds of million. And he says to me, I've never had a son, and I would like to give you this nursery because I feel that you're my son. And then I get a biento from Mother. So we pull up everything and come to the ashram. Now, Mother calls us right away, and she says about the gardens. They have told you I have chosen all the flowers? And we said, yes, Mother. And she said, must be very beautiful. And my wife says, it will be, Mother, because it's for you. And then Mother looks at me and she says, it must be a thing of great beauty, of such a beauty that when men enter, they will say, ah, this is it. And they will experience physically and concretely the significance of each garden. In the garden of youth, they will know youth. In the garden of bliss, they will know bliss, and so forth. And then she raises her hand and she says, one must know how to move from consciousness to consciousness. So, Mother put us in a place called Promesse, and I started looking in Oroville. This was late '69, and I found a place that was somewhat protected by a canyon on one side and a low road on another side. And I wrote to Mother, and she blessed it. And then, you know, we were only 12 or 15 people then in Oroville. And some people started coming and they wanted to work in the nursery. So we wrote to Mother and said, Mother, will you give your blessings for this person's name, that person's name? And Mother wrote back, if people come and want to work with goodwill, there's no need to to ask my blessings. So we began. Now, it's a long, long process. And I had to go through so much. And now that the years have passed, I see that every painful difficulty was a great blessing, because it helped me to grow. So many challenges there, so many difficulties with people and myself. So much to clear out and still to clear out. But at a certain point, she began to I can only say that things fell away. That the more I offered myself to her, the more I tried to surrender, the less struggle to get rid of things. She removes the veils. At the head she stands of birth and toil and fate. In their slow rounds, the cycles turn to her call. Hers is the mystery the night conceals. The Spirit's alchemist energy is hers. And I know you have read this, many of you have read this passage. There are other passages. And Mother gave me the great blessing to read Savitri for the first 10 years of Oroville. And not only the blessing, but the grace not to try to struggle to understand it with the mind. Just to let it come. Let it enter. But reading it out loud, because the mantra sounds and enters deep into the soul. So when you read Savitri, don't read a lot. Read a small portion out loud and let it enter. I've been reading it for 50 years now, and I could never give a talk on Savitri. I can only read it to you. I asked Mother, in her Mahakali aspect, to cleanse this soul, to get rid of everything that held me from surrendering at her feet. I don't recommend it. There's an easier way to love her, to offer yourself to her. More and more. And now, Sri Aurobindo once said to someone, they asked him, how to go about this. And he said, well, if you can remember when you begin the work and then remember when you complete the work, and perhaps once in a while in the middle of the work. And you know, if we can make that a practice, wake up, mother, mother, mother. Have our meal, Mother, Sri Aurobindo. Noontime, have our meal, Mother, Sri Aurobindo. In our work, before we start, when we finish, Mother, Sri Aurobindo. Dinner time, Mother, Sri Aurobindo. Go to sleep, focus on them, ask them to help. Ask them what you need to ask them. When I go to the Samadhi, I talk to Sri Aurobindo all the time. I tell him things of the day, where I need help. And most often I pray for others. I ask him to bless this one, to bless that one, to help this one, to help that one. And in the Om choirs, Mother is with us. She wouldn't have given me that Adesh. She gave me 3 in my lifetime. The first one, to bring down the new music. The second one, to care for the service tree over the Samadhi for the rest of my life. The first great branch that broke was facing south. Huge branch. And it was in a cyclone, and Mother said it was our lack of consciousness caused it. And I came in, Parichan was there with me, and Mona and some boys were up there cutting it all wrong. Because if you cut a branch, a heavy branch straight down like this, it can tear all the way down the trunk and just open wounds by peeling away all the bark. And my father had taught me this. I said, Parichan, can I go up? Yes. So I went up and we made the cut from beneath, 1/3, and then cut from the top, and it came out perfectly. Parichan comes back and he says, Mother has just given you this blessing packet to care for the tree for the rest of your life. What a joy that was. And I would go up in the tree and prune it. And one time, I was very far up in the tree, and I turned, and there was Mother in her room. And I looked at Mother, and I think it was Vasudha who got very angry. He's looking at you, and I almost fell off, but Mother saved me. I mean, it was dangerous climbing, and at that time, you know, I didn't know about saddles and ropes and belts and all the knots. Now we have professional tree pruners and younger people to do the work. So, by the very fact that you are here, Mother is with you. Just confide in her. Ask her what you have to ask her. Amal Kiran was a very close friend of mine. He started publishing my first poetry in the early 1970s, when poetry was just coming down like that. And he would answer any questions of mine. And one day I said to him, Amal, when a line comes down and you feel it is not quite right. And you're not supposed to use the mind. What should I do? And he said, appeal. And then he waited a little bit and he said, if you are patient, there will always be an answer. And I tell you, if you ask Mother in all humility, you will always have the answer that you need. In Savitri, she said to take a letter opener, concentrate and put the letter opener, and where it fell on that point was what you needed for that day. Incredible. All the help we need is there.